months ago, and then he did 10 weeks ago, 10 days, you get the picture. I thought it was very well done. The 10-year part took place over in the Middle East where they were serving, so you got to see how
all started out.
Yes, like I said, I really enjoyed that part of it. And now I won't say that I didn't have some of the issues I had where there were way too many people to keep track of in this book. Because we happen to be doing this podcast and I have to write notes, I was very thankful because I don't know if I could have kept track without that. So I would almost suggest that if you haven't read this book, you might want to keep some notes.
But the nice thing about the book that I liked particularly was the fact that Henry Kenneth's storyline is in first person, where Zeke Beaumont's storyline was in third person. So you always knew what part you were reading at that time. So that was very helpful. I did like that part of the book. Now, if you were casting a movie, who would you cast as Henry?
As Henry, I would say more of like maybe a little bit older Christian Bale. I think maybe Christian Bale as maybe about 10 years from now.
Well, I'd put Sam Elliott just because I'd put Sam Elliott in almost anything. So that's makes my little old heart go pity-pat. So.
Yeah, you're learning something about Ms. Dark here. Were there any characters in this book that you just wanted to smack upside the head?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Hayden. Hayden had issues. He was...
Hitting a man who has issues?
He had alcohol problems, and he was falling off the wagon. It was pretty obvious. He was carrying the torch for somebody from years before. This is part of his problem, was a feud he was having with Billy Delavane. Apparently they were in love with the same person, and it was a long time ago. This was all part of but Hayden didn't do anything to help himself. I just wanted to smack him upside the head. Yes.
I'll tell you who I wanted to smack upside the head, if I could, would be Debbie Gibson's mother.
Well, yes.
Because I just do not understand how a mother can let an 11-year-old run off with a bohemian painter.
Well, it does come down at the end of the book, but you don't know this until you've almost finished the book, that he is her real father, but she doesn't know that. And
yeah. So
I guess the mother knew it, but
the mother knew it. You know,
nobody else did.
Still letting your child know that it's okay to run around with a stranger. So,
well, yeah. And Mother was not in the book. I mean, very, very little of Mother was.
She really,
she was a non-character in the book.
The thing about this story is there are a lot of plot twists and red herrings in this book. They work. They really do. Some books they throw them in there to
just
confuse
muddy the water.
Story, but this was actually done very well. Kudos to Mr. Axelrod.
Yes, because all of the evidence that was planted by the bad guys could point to two people at least. And that was part of the story. It was trying to frame someone else. If you could meet any of those characters in real life, who would you like?
Probably Billy Delavane.
Yeah, he sounds...
He sounds like somebody I could sit around and have a beer with or something.
Since he was a contractor, I was wondering if maybe Mr. Axelrod
has a friend who bases it
on himself.
Who knows?
Now I know.
Maybe we'll find out.
One of the things I found on Amazon was the fact that Stephen Axelrod uses real people on Nantucket. He uses their real names in his stories as both bad guys and good guys. He has people that come to him and ask him to make them his next villain. So he thinks that's
pretty interesting.
He thinks that's a big compliment.
Now, one thing that Mom mentioned when she was giving her synopsis is about the island itself. And in some stories, the story could take place anywhere, but Nantucket was definitely a character in this book. And actually, I've never been to Nantucket, and after reading this, I think I'd like to go to Nantucket.
Don't go in the summertime.
I would love to go anytime.
You can't afford it.
Because I'm sure in the summertime it's very beautiful.
Oh, it is. It's a beautiful place. I figured out the story about a third of the way in. It just it wasn't anything particular. It was just that I've read so many mysteries. Just popped into my head who Scooter was. I just couldn't shake it. So I was very happy when I found out. I can't say there was any particular thing that made me think. There was a little bit of time when I thought possibly maybe Hayden really had done it. Henry didn't think his friends were guilty, so I knew they weren't. It wasn't going to turn out.
Now, what did you think of Chief Kennis as our protagonist? Do you think he was adept at solving crime?
I think he was. I think he did a good job. He looked at but he knew his people on the island. He knew his friends.
That was his strong suit, definitely.
That was his strong suit. No matter what Tornovich said or the FBI, he knew Hayden didn't do it, and he knew Billy Delavane didn't do it. I think there were a few things he could have done better. I think part of the trying to solve some of the town issues that he has to deal with beside the story.
When Homeland Security came in, they pretty much kicked him out of his office. Mm-hmm. He was having to still deal with all the ins and outs of being a chief on Nantucket.
Mm-hmm. I thought that Tornovich went over the line when he arrested Henry. He was just looking for anybody he could blame this on so he could take the credit for the whole thing. I didn't like that part. I know it was part of the story and it had to be. One of the questions we looked at was, could there have been a different ending? Well, the only other ending I could think of was the bomb goes off.
Well, there is another ending, and one of the things is the romance between Henry and Franny fizzles after a while. They could have ended up together, which I'm kind of glad they didn't.
Right. And, she's built a career, and she's thinking of her career and her future. She's not going to stay on a small island off the coast of Cape Cod.
Because the one thing you're going to find out about Mom and I is that we're not too much into the gratuitous romance and mystery novels. Not that there's anything wrong with
sometimes romance fits right into the story. It's just, I don't think that just, hello, we haven't seen each other in 3 years, boom, we're in bed. Okay, the whole story could have gone completely on the same path without that romance. It wasn't necessary to the story.
We agree with Dame Agatha that it doesn't need to be in there.
She hated the same thing. The story was wrapped up very neatly.
Yes.
I mean,
wrapped up with a bow.
Yes.
And I would definitely read more of this series.
Oh, I would too.
I even may go back and read the first one. I'd like to see, even though I don't feel it's necessary, I'd just do it because I'd like to read it.
Mm-hmm. I enjoyed this book. It was fast moving. I highly recommend his books. I think they're very well done. He's very talented, and I'm looking forward to reading others in his series. Just remember that we are not experts, and our opinion is just that.
Our opinion.
We did reach out to him. He was very kind and responded to us.
And we hope we did his book justice.
He very kind. We asked him 5 questions.
Well, he combined 2 of them.
Yes.
Which is fine.
So, the questions we asked him were, what was the first mystery you ever read? And he responded it was The Hardy Boys, which he devoured with an addict's frenzy. A new one came out every month, and I haunted my local bookstore in a fever of impatience. I can still get a little of that buzz when I see those 60s era blue hardback books in a junk shop with their gaudy cover paintings, usually of the boys in jeopardy.
The second and third question we asked was, did the author influence your writing style, and what authors influenced your writing? Those books didn't influence my writing much, except for their sense of keeping the story going at all costs. As far as mysteries go, Michael Connelly is the king.
I agree.
I reread a couple of his books before I start a new one of my own. Dismantling his plots to see how he puts them together is one of the best exercises for an aspiring mystery writer. But those twisty stories don't obscure his fascinating characters and atmospheric locations. A couple of more literature writers who influenced me, maybe too much, John Fowles and Ernest Hemingway. One day I hope to write a phrase as deceptively simple and perfect as this one. From To Have and Have Not, the cool early morning feeling of a hot day.
Question 4 was, what are you working on now? And his response is, Nantucket Five Spot, the book you chose, is number 2 in the Henry Kenneth series. Number 5, Nantucket Counterfeit, is coming out in October.
Can't wait.
I'm hard at work on the 6th book, Nantucket Penny. That's something to look forward to.
We then asked Mr. Axelrod if he had any speaking engagements or anything on his schedule, and he said that not really at this moment. He is doing some readings at the Hyannis Public Library, which I wish I lived near. I would go, definitely. And he has some book signings. But we are going to keep in touch with Stephen, and hopefully he'll pass on any events he has coming in. We will definitely pass those on to you.
And again, we thank him so much for taking the time to respond to our silly little questions. We were thrilled when he responded.
How we would like to end this first review is by listing 2 things that we learned from reading this book.
The first thing we learned is lock your doors. The people in Nantucket, at least when this story was written, I'm sure it's not the same today, but nobody locked their doors, so the bad guys, quote unquote, could go in and out of houses at will and plant evidence. And there's one scene in the book which really kind of blew my mind. A woman followed our antagonist while he was planting evidence in Hayden Krakauer's home, and Hayden came walking in. He came home from work, and the woman stripped down and told him that she had been walking through the neighbor's yard, got wet when the sprinklers turned on, so she just came into Hayden's house to take a shower, which she did, and she's standing there naked. And he just didn't blink an eye. He went and got her a towel, and she left. That was it. It just would not happen in my neighborhood, at least as far as I know. So, the other thing we learned,
Apparently, it's very easy to get out of jail on Nantucket. When Chief